Hello, 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 guys. Welcome to the gates of heaven. Palm me a 20 and I'll let you through. That's kind of what it's like when Octville does that one mechanic that just whitens out your screen. But you know what? I'm having fun in Final Fantasy XIV, and I think quite a few people are as well. Because over the course of Dawntrail, we have looked at the numbers provided by LuckyBancho to see how the community at large is reacting to Dawntrail. And well, yeah, it was rather negative for a while there, but things seem to have bottomed out. Is Final Fantasy XIV on the precipice of making a comeback? Is this actually bad news? Well, let's look into the numbers and see what we can conclude. The last time we had an update from LuckyBancho, it was July 27th, and the post that I'll be referencing in this video was well posted on September 27th. So it does contain the numbers for patch 7.3 because patch 7.3 was released on August 5th. Though it's not going to have the numbers for patch 7.35 because that just came out. Now, bear in mind, I don't speak Japanese, so I'm just using my browser's built-in translation feature. So take specific words with a grain of salt, if not a mountain of it, and I'll be really just focusing in on the broad takeaways here. I'll leave a link in the description down below if you wish to peruse LuckyBancho's blog of your own. He has a bunch of graphs telling you what parameters he used to determine what is an active character. They seem pretty reasonable to me. And well, the number of active characters has remained roughly the same since last time, 880,000, at about 880,000. And then in the next paragraph he says it actually went up by about 3,000. And also an interesting stat, returning characters who were inactive last time and are active this time is up by about 70,000, from 120k to 190k, with new characters down by about 20,000. I don't think anyone would necessarily call them glowing numbers, but looking at the previous reports here, and especially if you remember that July update, it does seem as if this fall off Final Fantasy XIV was having ever since Dawntrail came out has bottomed out. It's no longer really rapidly bleeding off players like it was for a while there. So, how did we get here? What does it mean? And where do we go from here? Well, I think it's safe to say that 7.3 was pretty dang good. In terms of overall content, it doesn't change much for the game state, right? I think patch 7.35 has been really good by itself, but that wasn't part of this update. Remember, this post by LuckyBancho came out on September 27th, and patch 7.35 only came out a couple of days ago. And I do think it's fair to say that a lot of hype and adoration surrounding Final Fantasy XIV is firmly centered not just on gameplay, but also the story. And I think for a lot of people, especially if you experience 7.2 for yourself, it was a massive breath of fresh air coming from 7.0 and 0.1. It was a massive improvement in terms of actually telling a story, making it engaging with interesting characters, hello Sphane, and having at least a somewhat interesting antagonist with Calyx. And 7.3 builds off of that, in my opinion, is even better. I don't think we would see these numbers that Final Fantasy XIV is doing right now. I don't think we would see this fall off bottoming out if the story continued at the same quality of 0.0 and 0.1. I do think there was a drastic shift. The winds have changed with the storytelling of Final Fantasy XIV, and it really does feel as if the story is getting back on the right track of things. 0.3 was good, it was great even, and I do think it laid a solid foundation for where we go from here, and intriguing people and interesting people enough to say, hey, I kind of want to experience this again. Maybe I fell off beforehand, but you know what? I want to see what 0.2 and 0.3 are all about. Why are people talking about them so positively? I think that somewhat explains the returning character number that we talked about, because that one went up a lot by 70k, from 120k to 190k. I do think it's largely because of the story, because mechanically, not too much has changed with the release of 7.3, at least in this time period. It's not like we had the Deep Dungeon, it's not like we had the Monster Hunter Wilds collaboration. We had a new Alliance raid, whoop-de-doo, which sure, it was good, but I don't really see that by itself drawing back a whole bunch of players. I think this somewhat goes to show, and it's not definitive or anything, but it's the easiest thing to point to in my opinion, is the increased quality in the storytelling of Final Fantasy XIV, which to me is undeniable with 7.2 and 0.3. Just the mechanics of actually telling and relaying a story to the player base feels far more in line with the style of storytelling that so many people fell in love with in terms of tone, atmosphere, vibe, dialogue, characterization, and pacing. When you have a game to the scale of Final Fantasy XIV, You will always have people that dislike or like any given thing, but those ratios between the people that like and dislike something aren't necessarily evenly split. For me, it was abundantly obvious that point 2 was a massive course correction for the storytelling quality of FF14, and point 3 built off of that to tell an even better story that had decent payoff to what we had in point 2, and even going all the way back to point 0. Taking a lot of the story elements that worked and were actually interesting back then, and really running with them, while not paying too much attention or time to the elements that a lot of people, I think, generally didn't like, or just weren't too enthused by. I can't speak for everyone, but that definitely applied to me. It was also one of the biggest takeaways I saw from a lot of people who were watching me stream point 2 and point 3. They're like, wow, this is way better than point 0 Dawn Trail. And like, yeah, it was. It didn't feel nearly as heavy-handed and blunt as, say, like point 0, where you had characters looking at your screen going, with friendship and magic or something like that. There are actually interesting themes that were being developed, fleshed out, and told alongside interesting characters they made me care about. That is a powerful thing. Now, where do we go from here? Well, I don't really see Dawn Trail recouping all the players that it lost with point 4 and point 5. It's possible, I just don't really see it happening. I think it's fair to say that Dawn Trail lost most of the people that it was going to lose with the quality of Dawn Trail of point 0 and point 1. I don't think it's impossible to recoup a few of them, but as is the case with most like MMORPGs and long-term development, any sin or transgression will be forgiven immediately the moment a really cool trailer comes out. I know for a lot of people they don't think that's the case, but as someone who has followed MMORPGs for most of my life, yeah, it kinda is. I can't speak for you individually, but for the whole. And I do think it's possible for point 4 and point 5 to be really good. I do. I don't really see it changing the game state of Final Fantasy XIV. I think that's an 8.0 thing. But with point 3.5, I do think it has improved somewhat. The content is more interesting. I think the Deep Dungeon is super fun, and it's content that I want to continue to do. It is genuinely pretty dang fun. And I would love to see more of this type of content in the future from Final Fantasy XIV. That doesn't just mean another Deep Dungeon. But the story of the Deep Dungeon was pretty dang good. I love getting more Feoul lore. And the content of the Deep Dungeon made me want to continue playing, which is a hell of a lot more than I can say about the previous Deep Dungeons. They never really sparked my interest or my desire to continue playing like this one has, Pilgrim's Traverse. And I think the big one for a lot of people will be the storytelling, because it's Final Fantasy XIV. It's a game built and predicated on its story. It's not the only important element, that is also the gameplay, but it is a massive pillar for the game. And if the story continues to be of the same quality and caliber of point 2 and point 3, then I think Final Fantasy XIV will continue this, like, course correction. And the big one, I think, will be the announcement of 8.0. The vibes have to be on point. They have to be. They have to be excellent. They have to be firing on all cylinders. It has to be cool, it has to be interesting, and immediately engaging and enthralling. We're done with the summer vacation stuff. Regardless of your thoughts about how well they executed in the summer vacation, do something really big and cool. That's what I think Final Fantasy XIV needs, alongside really good storytelling. Because if 8.0 comes out the gate swinging, and we get a cinematic, even somewhat in the stratosphere, of like Heavensward, Shadowbringers, and Endwalker, I think a lot of people will be able to go, hey, yeah, point 0 and point 1 weren't the best, but point 2 and point 3, and hopefully point 4 and point 5, were pretty dang good. And you know what? I want to see what this is all about. I do think that could happen. I want to see FF14 take some risks in the future, and just overall stop being so risk adverse, which is what they were for the longest time. I also think some key job changes could go a long way to reinvigorate interest in combat in this game. Because sure, you can put out really good, fun combat content in the game, but if people don't like pressing the actual buttons, that can only go so far. It's been a winding, rocky road for Final Fantasy XIV to get to this point, and while I do think it still has some work to do to improve the overall game, I think it is improving and trying to improve in a few key areas before we even get to 8.0. I've been enjoying the game more than I did back in point 0 and point 1, and while it's definitely not perfect, like I keep saying, I do think it's a step in the right direction. But here's where you come in. Leave a comment down below with the overall thoughts on the current state of Final Fantasy XIV. Were you someone who dropped out and came back in? Are you still kind of on the fence about coming back, or have you never even stopped to begin with, and what is about the game that you love so much? I would love to hear your thoughts and hear your opinions and hear your perspectives. And while you're down there, please leave a like and subscribe. It'd really help the channel out and help support future content, and I greatly appreciate it. And building off of all of this, I do think patch 7.3 overall, including 0.35, is easily the best patch Dawntrail has had up to this point. Easily! And if you want to hear my thoughts and my overall impressions of patch 7.3, you should check out this video right here for more. Stay safe, everybody. Have a great day, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye, everybody. Until we meet again.